Good evening. This is the June 7th special meeting of the Northampton City Council. It is a continuation of items from the meeting on June 3rd and was scheduled to accommodate significant public comment and to allow the council to do our work at a reasonable time for us and for the public. So I want to note that this meeting is being audio and video recorded for all that are participating on Zoom with us. Laura, will you please take the roll?
Sure. Councillor Dwight.
Here.
Councillor Foster.
Here.
Councillor Jarrett.
Here.
Councillor Labarge.
Here.
Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Nash.
Here.
Councillor Quinlan.
Here.
Councillor Shara.
Here.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Here.
Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. First up, there had been a request for 2 readings on item 21.290, which is the Academy of Music bathroom expansion and renovation appropriation. But since we had this meeting with the item posted and there were questions about the project, we held over the second reading for this meeting, and we were able to ask Executive Director Deborah Janthony and Board Director Andrew Crystal to attend. So I would like to move that item first for its second reading, and then we'll move right on to the ordinances. So I see.
So moved.
Thank you. Councillor Quinlan?
Since it's listed as a first reading, do we have to move to suspend the rules first? I was unclear on that last week. I'm sorry.
I think that is what we decided we were going to do. Is that right, Councillor Dwight? Wasn't that your suggestion? You look skeptical.
No, my suggestion was another one that was more convoluted. But again, in the interest of belts and suspenders, we'll say my motion is now to suspend rules to allow for a second.
Second.
Motion is made by Councillor Dwight, seconded by Councillor Quinlan. Is there any discussion on the suspension of rules? Seeing none, roll call please, Laura, on suspending rules.
Councillor Dwight.
Yes.
Councillor Foster.
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Councillor Maori.
Yes.
Councillor Nash.
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan.
Yes.
Councillor Shara.
Yes.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Yes. Move second reading, please.
Second.
Motion was made by Councillor Dwight, seconded by Councillor Foster, and second reading. Okay, so we're in the second reading. The motion's on the floor for second reading. And hold on, I'm trying to allow Mayor Narkowitz to unmute. There you go. That should work. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. As you may recall from our meeting on Thursday, this was a request for to provide some additional funding to the Academy of Music to allow them to complete a significant bathroom renovation and expansion. And they had bids that came in higher than expected. And so I was bringing an order to City Council to try to seek additional funding to allow them to get this completed, particularly in time for their September 8th reopening. And so I've asked Deborah Janthony, who's the Executive Director, and I believe Andrew Crystal, who's the President of the Board, to attend. I also provided some materials that they gratefully sent along and distributed those out. I think on Saturday. And so I guess if allowed, I would ask Deborah Janthony to address the project and answer any questions that folks have.
Great.
Move to recognize Deborah Janthony and also Andrew Crystal, Board Chair of AON.
Thank you. Motion's made by Councillor Dwight, seconded by Councillor Jarrett to recognize both our guests. Any discussion? Roll call please, Laura, on the recognition.
Councillor Foster.
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Councillor Maori.
Yes.
Councillor Nash.
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan.
Yes.
Councillor Shara.
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe.
Didn't hear you.
Yes.
Oh, he's here. Councillor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay, welcome, Deborah. It's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us attend this meeting to share the process of the bathroom renovations. I'm going to speak in general terms about the project, but Andrew Crystal can speak to some of the architectural and mechanical components of the project. In general, we started on entertaining, renovating the bathrooms, the restrooms, a little over 2 years ago, based on the need. Because we've been growing exponentially, we have gone from, over the last 5 or 6 years, gone from serving 40,000 to over 62,000. And that is demonstrated through the bathroom lines. We only had 4 stalls in the stalls only bathroom, and 2 stalls and 4 urinals in the stalls and urinal bathroom, which during a full sellout show, usually the women take over both bathrooms and send the men upstairs to the wheelchair accessible bathroom. It's just not tenable, and it doesn't serve the public. In addition, due to COVID, we started to reassess the need for safety features, touchless sinks and faucets. We have literally no ventilation downstairs, and also to make sure that we have a ventilation system. Over a little over 2 years ago, we started to look into renovating the restrooms, and we sought funding. So we applied to the Massachusetts Cultural Facility Fund, in which we received some partial funding from them, as well as Smith College. We received a small grant from the State Economic and Housing Development, thanks to Joe Comerford, as well as Beveridge Foundation. We kicked off a campaign this past fall and raised an additional $82,000 from the individuals and the public. But when we put the bids out and the numbers started coming back, even early on, just about a year ago, when we started to do the estimates, every time we put out an estimate, the numbers just kept getting higher. So at this juncture, the numbers, have increased where we can't move forward unless we get further support from the city.
Thank you. Mr. Crystal, is there anything you'd like to add? You should be able to unmute. Are you able to? Yeah.
There we go. Yes, thank you and good evening. Just to reinforce some of the things Deborah said, we began planning this 2 years ago. From the time we began planning to now, the cost of lumber has basically tripled, as has most of the other building materials. So we did an early estimate with Wright Builders. We saw that estimate, as Deborah mentioned, go up each time. So we sort of knew where we were going. One of the other difficult things with this project was we had to launch our capital campaign in the middle of the pandemic. And I think people are concerned with social issues and food insecurity issues far more than the arts. So we raised $82,000. It was only half of what we raised in our last capital campaign, when there wasn't so many other things that people needed to fund. As Deborah said, we have dozens of shows already booked for the fall, and we feel it's really critical for our patrons, for people to show up and enjoy the theater and continue to buy tickets, that we address the health and safety concerns in the bathroom. So as Deborah mentioned, we're putting in new ventilation that's 100% fresh air. So all of the air brought in from the outside is fresh, 100% is exhausted, and there's a heat exchanger between the two. So we recapture energy on the exhaust. The faucets are touchless. The hand dryers have HEPA filters, they're touchless. The toilets are touchless. So we're trying to be sensitive to the concerns that people have had over the last year, and I think are experiencing now that they're getting to go out and be in the public again. And the last thing that aligned for us, while we've been waiting 2 years, this happens to be the ideal time for us to go forward quickly because we have nothing booked. All of our shows were either canceled or delayed until, as the mayor said, September 8th. Then we've got Deborah, maybe a dozen or more shows just in September. So it's really critical that we achieve the funding quickly. The city's gone out to bid and accepted a low bid. It's actually gone out twice because there was some amendments and they were helpful. It lowered the final cost that came in. And the successful bidder is a Northampton firm, D.A. Sullivan. They were the successful bidder. Once we know we've got the full funds allocated, we can award that and they can begin ordering materials. So that's really where we are. We're in a time when the timing's good because we don't have any shows, but the timing's bad because costs have doubled and in some cases tripled on much of the construction related work. So we're hoping that the city can once again step in and help the theater, which I think with some of the information Deborah sent, you can see is really quite an economic driver for the city. And I think being able to host sold out shows through the fall is simply becoming a feeder for all the restaurants that we're hoping are going to survive through this. So we appreciate anything that the council can approve to help us reach our goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, do you have any questions? For our guests? Councilor Jarrett?
Thank you both for coming. I know in the past you've gotten a number of grants from the Community Preservation Act. So I just wanted to inquire, was that an option for this project at all to apply?
No, it wasn't. Actually, we have been before the Community Preservation Act recently, and were awarded $55,000 towards the renovation of the lobby areas. So it's in conjunction with this. So we did receive funding, but it was, it was a separate project from this one.
So I can add to that. We had two renovation projects. We ran out of funds 5 or 6 years ago when we did the auditorium, and we never renovated the front lobby or the inner lobby where the concession stand is, or the handicapped restroom. So we were granted funds from the Community Preservation Committee for the lobby restoration work upstairs. What we did was we combined them for efficiencies in general charges and overhead so that the contractor bid both. We simply they're two separate contracts because the source of funding, but we achieved some significant savings by combining them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Seeing no other questions, I thank you both so much for joining us this evening and giving us that extra context. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion from the council, then roll call, please, Laura, on second reading.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
and Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading, and we are going to go back up to the second item on the agenda, which are the ordinances. So first, we have 21.217, an ordinance to move zero lot line from section 10.14 to section 6.13. This is on second reading.
Move approval, please.
Motion's been made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Labarge. And hold on, let me, Carolyn's here somewhere, I think. There's Carolyn. Any discussion on second reading on this item? Okay, I'm just trying to make sure I can see all of the council. Like somebody's missing. All right, seeing no discussion, roll call, please. Laura.
Councilor Labarge,
Councilor Labarge, we can't hear you.
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to 21.218, an ordinance to amend zero lot line section of code. This is on first reading. We had postponed this first reading from the May 20th meeting. And now what we're calling is clean language has been submitted by the Office of Planning and Sustainability on May 27th. So I assume that you would like me to read the clean version and then we could talk about what's changed. Is that the best way?
Yes.
I see some nods.
Hey,
Okay,
Can I move approval to put it on the floor?
sure. Motion made by Counselor Dwight and seconded by Counselor Labarge. Okay, so I'm going to read this version. So this is upon the recommendation of Mayor David J. Narcoitz and Planning and Sustainability. An ordinance of the City of Northampton, Massachusetts, providing that the Code of Ordinances, City of Northampton, Massachusetts, be amended to alter the requirements of zero lot line projects in order to maintain more consistent setbacks within neighborhoods. Be it ordained by the City Council, City of Northampton City Council assembled as follows: move subsection 10.14 to a new subsection in chapter 350-6 and amend as shown. Section 350-613, reduced lot line, RLL developments. This is an editor's note. Replace all instances of quote zero lot line unquote through the code with and replace with quote reduced lot line. Replace all references of 10.14 to 6.13. Reduced lot line developments are developments or portions of developments where house lots have a side yard setback of 0 or more feet on the side lot, the quote reduced lot line unquote. Such a reduction in the standard side yard setback may be granted if the following standards A through E are met. A, the reduced lot line side of a house lot, 1, abuts permanently protected open space, or 2, abuts the lot line of a lot which is under common ownership at the time the reduced lot line development is proposed, and hold up. Okay. It's okay. 1 shares a party wall with the abutting structure on the commonly owned lot. 2 has a reduction from the standard setbacks such that the combined setbacks may be up to 10 feet less than double the standard setback. B, a 5-foot maintenance easement must be obtained or reserved by the owner of a house on a reduced lot line from the property owner abutting the reduced lot line in any development pursuant to A1 or A2 to above where the setback is 5 feet or less to allow normal maintenance. Said easement may allow a roof overhang of up to 2 feet, and in such case, the easement shall allow roof drainage onto the easement area and sheet flow across the abutting property. C, there shall be a minimum of 4 shade trees of not less than 1.5 inches caliper planted or maintained on each lot in accordance with the city's tree list and planting guidelines, including 2 along the street frontage. See also subsection 350-6.5D. D, only 1 principal structure per lot is allowed in a reduced lot line development. E, any detached accessory structure on the lot must meet the standard setbacks for such structures. Modify chapter 350 attachment 7 URB and 9 URC by adding a reference to reduced lot line section 6.13. Setbacks front equals 10 feet minimum, side equals 15 feet minimum, side equals 0 feet on one side for 0 lot line. See subsection 6.13. Okay, so that is the amended version that I believe Counselor Jarrett's amendments and Carolyn Mish put them in there, consolidated, and then worked with him. Counselor Jarrett.
I just wanted to note there is a kind of a hidden or. It's next to an image. It's between I and II. So just to clarify that either I has to be true or I.
Oh, that was a hidden or right there. It was on, it had its own setback. Okay. So that was an or. between those two under two, number two. Okay, discussion. Counselor Jarrett.
I'm happy to explain this again. I know I explained it last time, but it was in a very messy version that you saw and probably didn't have time to really review it. So I'm happy to explain the reasons that I'm putting this forward, if that's helpful for folks.
Please.
Okay. So the first was to provide more flexibility than the current options. So if we require a house to sit right on the lot line which was the original proposal in most cases, so that has disadvantages. It requires that easement for access no matter what. While here it's only required if it's 5 feet closer than 5 feet. And it creates a situation where you don't own the land that's right outside your window. So this allows that option, but it also allows the lot line to be located in the best place for that site, which could take into account existing site features like trees. And then the second was to set the width between structures to be closer to the historical development pattern of the districts. So in the urban residential B district, which surrounds Florence Center and other, the Bay State neighborhood and the areas further away from downtown Northampton, it would require a 20-foot minimum distance between the principal structures. And in the URC district, which surrounds downtown Northampton and has houses that are much closer together, it would be 10 feet, which is actually the same as the original proposal, but allows more flexibility for where you put the lot line rather than right at the set of the house. And then finally, the term reduced lot line is more accurate than zero lot line, as zero is only one of the many options. Carolyn, did you want to add anything?
Yes, so I think that that definitely sums up the modifications, and they make sense. I did realize as Councilor Shara was reading through the ordinance that there's a clarification needed on that last little section that relates to changing the tables to indicate that there's a reference to section 6.13 now in the attachments. And then there's a block that gives the setbacks, and it says front 10, side 15, unless it's a 0 side setback. And really it's 15 only in the B. In C, it should still read 10 feet. So that wasn't intended to change the side setbacks in the URC district. So before it goes to codification, I just want to make sure that we catch that. So, and that's, my editing error. I was trying to put all of that together into one sort of compact modification, and I failed to catch that difference between URB and yours.
So how would you, go ahead, Councilor Dwight.
Well, I was just going to say, actually, the modifications sound all borderline Scrivener, but I would propose it as an amended change if need be. But I think since Carolyn is essentially the author of the document and has noticed an error, a reference error that really doesn't affect the body of the amendment or the amendments or the ordinance, that I would defer to Carolyn's readjustment to language unless anyone else has any objections.
So how would you write that, Carolyn? Would it be side 15 feet minimum and then in parentheses put
I would say URB in parentheses and then 10 feet URC parentheses.
Okay. Councilor Jarrett?
Also, this last bit where it says side equals 0 feet on one side for 0 lot line, that seems to be incorrect in 2 ways. One, we're calling it reduced lot line, although maybe that's caught up by the editor's note. But second, in this proposal, you can have 0 feet on both sides potentially, or rather, it's not 0 feet. You can have less than 15 feet. Is point on both sides. And so assuming it meets the other criteria. So I wonder if we need to modify that.
Yeah, it could say 0 feet on a side for reduced lot line, but you're right, it's because this was just taking what the existing language is in those tables and noting it was really intended to say, I'll see also 613 because the reference, that's the changing location of that. So it this cleans up that old text too. Again, sort of making all the language tied together and consistent.
Does Laura, have you been able to keep up with this?
Oh, you're muted, Laura.
Okay, so is, whoopsie, let me get to where I can see it. So is the correction, instead of saying side equals 0 feet on one side for 0 lot line, that it should say side equals 0 feet on a side for reduced lot line? Is that what I heard?
What?
Yes, I mean, I think that's the easiest way, even though you could have more than 0 feet. I think once it references 613, it'll be clear what's allowed in that. So basically 0 is the minimum, and this table in the this section of the table of dimensions is all about what your minimum setback requirements are. So it's still accurate to say 0 is the minimum, and then reference that 613.
Are you saying it doesn't need to change, or I'm sorry?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, that 0, because there was a question that came up. Councilor Jarrett had said, well, it's not just 0, it could be another distance too. And so all I'm saying is the minimum is 0, but on A, as you had read previously, and then reduced lot line.
Thank you. Yeah, I got it.
Okay. So, Councilor Dwight, who made that amendment? And was there a second?
Well, so if we're going to do it as an amendment rather than a Scrivener's error or Scrivener's adjustment, then I move that language as proposed and worked out between Councilor Jarrett and Carolyn and Laura, that be the amendment. How's that? I move that we approve that.
Second.
That was motion was made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Maori to move that. Any discussion on that amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, let's Councilor Nash.
So as long as we're not trying to make this, to do this in 2 readings tonight, I don't think that's the intention. Yeah, I'm okay with us having that language to look at for second reading.
Okay, so you're okay with that amendment on first reading? Okay.
But that is the intention, that at our next council meeting, it'll be coming back for second rather than 2 readings tonight.
I've heard no mention of 2 readings tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please, Laura. Oh, Councilor Foster.
Sorry, very last minute, but my internet cut out there for a second, so I just wanted to make sure I'm where we're at. And Councilor Nash, you were saying that, I think I heard it, but that for our second reading,
you're frozen, Councilor Foster.
The completed language in the amendment.
So you froze, and I have no idea what you reiterated of what you understood of what Councilor Nash said, but if you can,
I believe I've got it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving this amendment, and we are planning on having a second reading at a future meeting, was what Councilor Nash was asking. Any other, and I think we lost Councilor Foster, or maybe there she is. Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that amendment has passed. So further discussion as amended. Counselor Nash.
Thank you, Council President. Carolyn and Councilor Jarrett. So this applies, this arrangement would apply for whether it's both the same owner or two different owners, correct? It's just,
I can explain it if you'd like. So this provision allows a property owner to evaluate their property and say, oh, I have some extra land. It will benefit me. It'll help me financially. Or I have a family member I'd like to be able to provide some land to, or what have you. I'm going to carve off this piece of property and follow the zero lot line provision because my house is too close to any new internal lot line that I might create. So I want to, but I'm okay with that on this new lot that I'm creating. So one owner has to own the whole piece at the time that this reduction in lot line, side lot line is created. So that person is the one who's saying, I'm okay basically with creating slightly smaller setbacks to the property line, so long as I keep, this minimum between the structures. But that person is fully aware, creating the situation so that the situation isn't being created, on you by someone else, if you're abutting that property. So it's internal lot lines to a commonly owned piece of property.
so I think we're saying the same thing. This always happens with zoning. So in the case of, so if it's the same property owner, they still have to either have it be 0 or a minimum of 10 or more, correct? Under this provision.
Right. So if you're just creating a single family house lot, then you have an additional option of a reduced lot line under this provision. Otherwise, the setbacks apply like they apply everywhere else. Or if it's a 2-family or a 3-family that you want to create, then you meet the typical setback for that, or the standard setback in that district. So in your C, it would be 10 feet, and your B, it would be 15 feet without using the 0 or reduced lot line, provision.
And so the same provision, so let's say there's two folks that own property, and then there's an existing home, and then somebody else owns a property next to it, that they could also use this provision of 0 lot line of one property owner talking to the other, correct?
No.
Okay.
No. Only the person who owns the piece, all of it, can change the internal lot line and setbacks if it's a single family house being created on those parcels.
Okay.
You can't it's not about negotiating with a different owner. It's only about the piece that you own and an internal lot line that you might be creating for yourself.
Okay. And one more question. I asked you this earlier today, Carolyn. It's just for clarification, which is that the dimensions of the lot still need to meet our minimum standards, correct?
Correct. So you still need the minimum lot size, the minimum lot frontage, minimum open space, and all the other dimensional elements that are required for developing on a property.
So basically, it's adding some flexibility into where a structure can be placed to accommodate. We had mentioned earlier today, possibly trees or a hill or a rock or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Councilor Maori, had I seen your hand?
Yeah, so just to clarify again, then the owner, after doing so, can then sell the second parcel. But it just has to make
Correct.
the decision about the lot line before selling.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So, and we've seen that in a number of cases where, you know, a property owner can only finance the purchase of a house on a lot by showing the bank that they can create an additional lot or maybe 2 lots. And so then they create that, they get the bank financing, and then they sell off the lot to go back to the bank and say, I'm making good on this arrangement that we had. Now I can keep my house at an affordable price, and because I'm selling off this other lot after I created that scenario.
Just to follow up, Carolyn, how close is that process? So, you know, you decide you want to do that. I mean, is it something that can happen right away that you can sell that? Or is there a process that would happen? If that was your plan, how long would it take you to kind of sell off that other, what other processes would you go through? I guess just the typical ones.
Yeah, so if that were someone's plan, and they wanted to act upon it right away, they would just file what we call an approval not required, meaning there's not a subdivision that's required in order to create the new lot. And then once that's endorsed by the planning board, that can go to record, and the property owner can either hold on to that parcel or sell it right away, whatever. It's typically whatever works for the property owner in terms of their finances or needs, or you know, if they're selling it to a family member, you know, the family member is itching to go, you know, right into building, then that might happen quickly, or it might take a while.
Right, and there's no impetus. I mean, they don't have to sell it after that in any time frame.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
I saw a hand. Was Councilor Jarrett?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the examples that Carolyn gave are certainly one. Some of the examples that we see, and they're important ones to remember, that they do help promote affordability in terms of for example, a family member being able to carve off a lot and having them build a house affordably. So that it is an important tool. But also that we are seeing this as a development tool where a developer will buy a lot or a lot that has a house, and either tear down the house or keep it, and add other lots around it. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, that's a part of the conversation, that is also happening, and I think a reason why we are looking at clarifying some of this is to make that the process and you know, the reasons that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you. Other Councilor Labarge, and then we'll go back to Councilor Nash unless there's someone else.
I have to agree with what I'm hearing, and especially from Carolyn Mish. I think this is a very valuable, affordable tool. And one question I do have for Carolyn Mish is, we are hearing of what has occurred in Ward 5 with the big houses and the lots and the closeness to it. Carolyn, I'm curious to know. I keep hearing big houses. When on Riverside Drive, I've seen larger homes with driveways, and in back of them, smaller homes. So can you clarify this for me about these big, large homes? I have to say, I don't agree with the homes being so close together at all. I don't agree with what I've seen with those homes. But want to know, Carolyn, as a planner for our city, what is the difference in the size of the houses that are being built now compared to the sizes that are off on Riverside Drive or wherever?
Well, I guess the short answer is, every lot is different. There are larger houses and smaller houses on larger lots and smaller lots. And there's examples in Bay State, there are examples in, other parts of Ward 5 and other neighborhoods in urban residential B and C, where historically lots that were carved up were between 40 and 50 feet wide. And there are houses that stretch, that already have much smaller setbacks than even a 15-foot setback or a 10-foot setback. And those houses, would be larger or the same size as what was emailed to the council, and as an example of a large house, 30 feet wide, I think is what a resident, Bill Ryan in Bay State, had suggested was too wide. But there are many examples of houses that wide or narrower on the same size lots that we're talking about, sort of the minimum 50-foot wide lot. So, but there are also, there's not one uniform size of house anywhere, I would say, in the city, or uniform lot size. So it's hard to, I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess from looking at the district perspective from B and C, the reason why we have the minimum lot size of 50 feet wide and 3,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet was intended to match some historical patterns that we found in neighborhoods that have been very of high value and high demand for where people want to live. So there is a historical context for that.
Right. I also feel there is a significant difference about the language on development. You could build a single family home, and that is, to me, a development. Or you could have 2 families, 3 families, homes being built. It's a development, but a different pattern versus a single family. That's the way I look at the language with development. I think that really needs to be looked at, because the calls that I've gotten, people that I've talked to, friends of mine in Northampton, about these ordinances, development is a language to really be looking at. A 1 family is a single home, that's still a development. There's no question about it. No matter what you're building is a development. So I just wanted to hear from you, Carolyn, on that language of development, because I think, to me, it's important, and other people, about the language of development. Here we have builders coming in, building whatever they're building, so-called developments, but we have people in our city who do own lots and put up a 1 single family home that still is a development. So what would you call what is occurring right now in Ward 5? It's not one home or 2 homes. What would you compare that language of development versus a single family, which is still a development?
I think it definitely, people have different concepts of what that term means, but I would agree with you that any, if you're developing 1 house or 3 houses, it can still be referred to as a development. I think what's currently happening in Bay State are, a series of single family house lots that are being created. And in fact, the zoning modifications over the last several years have I mean, the goal was to allow these pockets of new house lots to be created in close proximity to our centers, schools, walkable to resource parks and so forth. So it's definitely something that was and it continues to be encouraged as a way to accommodate the demand for housing and create opportunities for people to move, you know, horizontally, vertically, come into the community, you know, have their family members continue to live in Northampton.
Mhm. Okay, because that's all I've been hearing about for weeks now. It's about large houses. And it's like, you can build a house. I have right here on Florence Road, multi-million-dollar homes. On West Stanton Road, multi-million-dollar homes up way up on a hill, secluded with 2 to 3 houses on it. And that's their prerogative. They have the money, they can build what they want on their property. Could I afford that? No, period. I'm looking at what I'm seeing being built right now. And I'm going to be honest, as a counselor, I think the houses look nice, but do I like the way they're placed so close to each other? No, but the people who bought it apparently do like it. So that's what it's all about here. If they want their houses close, they pay for it. And I know I wouldn't pay $600,000 for a house and not have the privilege of having a nice front yard and a backyard, but everybody is different on what they like. So thank you, Carolyn, I appreciate it.
Other questions or comments on the ordinance as amended? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? I'm just checking. All right, Councilor Jarrett, then Councilor Nash.
Councilor Nash, if you want to, I have an additional amendment to offer. So if you want to speak to what we're already talking about,
like
please
to
go
do.
ahead
Yeah.
first.
So first, I want to say that that the work that Ms. Mish and Councilor Jarrett has done here, it's actually really creative. It's very thoughtful. Zero lot line has always bugged me, and Carolyn knows this, since it first came out like 15 years ago, and that there was this sense of like, you know, what's going on here, that it can be decided that the setback can be set by the individual property owner, and that this kind of draws a line. It says you can either be this way or you can be this way. You can't do this mushy in between stuff. And that you know, over the years, my impulse has said this really needs to go to planning board. You know, actually, it needs to be a special permit, because that it's a decision that needs to be weighed out in some way. But I'm actually, you know, the cleverness, and I mean that in a very nice way, of coming up with, you know, a formula. I always think of, you know, zoning is kind of like a board game, that it's the rules and it kind of lays out and develops as it goes. But this lays out the rules in a way that I think is also respectful to the way that natural streetscape develops, that has developed around our city. And I think it helps this proposal helps preserve that in a way that it doesn't have to go to special permit. Because I think if it went to special permit, they'd say, well, what are the rules? And they'd say, well, let's look at Councilor Jarrett's rules. Anyway, so I think this is a really nice solution, and want to thank Carolyn and Alex for the work on this. I can see you put a lot of time and energy into it. It's very thoughtful. So thank you. All right, now you can go and add more to it.
Go ahead, Councilor Jarrett.
Great, thank you, Councilor Nash. Appreciate that. So Laura, would you bring up the file I sent you earlier? So I'll read this. So this would be inserted right after the A section. That was the section that basically described the options for where you could do this. And it is B. For any lot with a reduced lot line, the sum of its side yard setbacks must be equal to or more than 2 times the standard side yard setback minus 5 feet. And I'll explain that. So this is an amendment that's intended to address the issue of the wider houses on the smaller lots. It does it just through setbacks, which is perfectly legal. It would allow in URB a 20-foot width structure on a 50-foot lot, and in URC a 35-foot width structure on the same lot. This is mostly the same as the previous amendment for when you have 2 lots. It's only when you get to 3 or more that it would create a stricter limit. It also places a stricter limit on the townhouse style where the 2 houses are right up against each other. Those would have to be either only 20 feet or 35 feet. And I want to say this isn't about a particular developer. It's rather that recent development has shown a way that this can be used, which does create many houses, larger houses that are much closer together than meets the historical pattern. And we've addressed some of that with the original, but its goal is to encourage this amendment's goal is to encourage the construction of smaller dwellings, which should cost less and be more affordable. Smaller dwellings do cost more per square foot, but the total cost matters in terms of accessibility. And to remember that if larger dwellings closer together are desired, this can still be done through a condo association approach, but that would trigger site plan and its requirements of fossil fuel-free heating and the significant tree ordinances. And if it also ends up encouraging multifamily dwellings, then we would get that benefit of increased efficiency and more affordability. So, this is something that I've heard from many of my constituents, that they would like us to regulate in this way. And I thought it was important to have a discussion at council, to think about it, to think about, is this a way we would like to to regulate, and to look at the pros and cons of it. So I'm bringing that forward for us to think about that, and to realize that there's many people who are concerned about this issue, and about the idea is that if you are going to build, say, on three of the narrowest lots that you could, that you're going to build smaller structures than with other, that's what this amendment would be trying to say, which hopefully would be more affordable than otherwise. So that I wanted to put that out there and hear thoughts on that.
Before we can,
I guess we need a second.
Yeah, is that your motion? Okay.
I second for purposes of discussion.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilor Jarrett and seconded by Councilor Dwight. Okay, now discussion. Go ahead, Councilor Dwight.
If I may, I know I'm never clear on this. What, particularly as it relates to zoning, when you can amend and change and modify, but there's a tipping point when you significantly change something that it actually has to start the process again. Because this amendment, I think, is one of the more significant ones, and has not been vetted in planning board, for instance, hasn't been discussed or subject to their approval. So I don't know if the solicitor's here or if Carolyn knows.
Can I interrupt you?
Oh, you've already done research on this. I defer to you.
I spoke to the solicitor and asked, and it was not his belief that this would trigger that process to have to go back to planning or to go back to legislative matters. That this still fell within the discussion of this ordinance and the topic of the ordinance, and that it would be an amendment to it and was part of our process to be able to amend it in this way. do you have, okay, Councilor Dwight?
Yeah, if I could, I suppose then I should follow up. I mean, we've all been on the receiving end of a lot of testimony from a neighborhood specific, let's be clear, but and one particular project does drive this discussion. One of my concerns, of course, is the ever-changing terms, trying to find the one that fits best. Like we were talking about McMansions previously, now we're talking about extra wide homes, which, by the way, I believe almost all of us live in houses that look dimensionally pretty close to what's being represented as an extra wide home. That makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I don't know about, I think that becomes problematic if we're relating it to one particular neighborhood when the case may not apply for the rest of the community. I'm a little concerned about custom fabricating zoning to target one particular developer and one particular development process. And by the way, when I'm using the term development here, I'm talking about a builder who's building on spec. They're building houses for the prospect of selling them. They don't necessarily have people who are purchasing. That could be an individual house or multiple houses. So I want to feel a damn sight more comfortable than I do right now about this.
Councilor Jarrett, do you want to respond or take further comment?
Now let's take further comment for now.
Okay. I saw Councilor Nash, yes?
Yes, and so part of this, I see part of this discussion embedded in the dimensional standards that are set up for URB. I don't see it so much an issue for URC with the 10-foot setbacks. So you have a 50-foot wide lot, you come in 10 feet and on either side, and it leaves you 30 feet for a structure. With the setbacks, the way they are for URB, where it's 15 on both sides, what happens is as you come in 15 on both sides, it leaves you with 20 feet. And that I think that, I think that that's part of, maybe a way to untangle it would be to untangle it through the lot dimension regulation. Maybe it's already too narrow. If you can't put a full 25-foot wide house. I mean, yes, some people you can make a 20-foot wide house, but now you're starting to get into a much smaller house that's not as practical for I don't think it's as desirable for a lot of people. Maybe the point is that that the dimensional requirements are what's squeezing the lot size and are the size of the structure, and that the way around it using the zero lot line allows you to expand it. And that's, I'm not going to refer to particular situations, but it could happen where you could expand the width of a structure by using zero lot line. So I'm just throwing that out there, that I think it's the underlying dimensional aspect that is part of the problem here.
Councilor Maori.
Well, now I would love a clarification. So when we're talking about width, we're talking about at the entryway where the front door is. I mean, just thinking
the frontage.
So the frontage. So it's always for frontage. So you can't change that around. I mean, you can't. Right. It has to be. Okay, that makes more sense. So it might impact how you lay the house out. Like I live in a cape, so of course it's wide in one way and rather narrow in the other. So just thinking about all the different ways it would be impacted. Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Councilor Thorpe.
Thank you. Is it possible I can hear from Carolyn Mish regarding this proposed amendment? her thoughts around this.
Carolyn, care to share?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay. I thought my microphone, I got a signal that said my microphone changed. So, I think that as Councilor Nash noted, with narrower lots, zero lot line is one tool. If you own some land in which you can carve off a 50-foot wide lot, is one tool to get a slightly reduced side setback instead of using the standard setback that's in the district. And many of the existing 50-foot wide lots that were built out, decades ago, don't have a standard 15-foot side setback to those lot lines, and they are wider than a 25-foot wide house. And they do accommodate capes and ranches and all sorts of different architectural styles that happen to be wider facing the street than they are, with their end to the street. And I the intention of zero lot line is to create that flexibility when you do have narrower lots. So by sort of as the ordinance was originally introduced, sort of gone back and forth about sort of how much flexibility to allow with that side setback line. And I think the way the ordinance came in for tonight's discussion created sort of that latitude and flexibility for providing space to locate structures as well as to avoid natural features like significant trees or ledge or any other kind of feature on a property that might be addressed by sliding a structure over. Yet at the same time, it creates enough of a separation between this next structure that you have that pattern that is typical for a neighborhood where you've got at least 20 feet between structures, even though the lot line might be somewhere in between. So the more you chip away at that by reducing that flexibility, then the less opportunity there might be to create different housing styles that meet people's family needs or individual needs, as well as addressing, trying to preserve certain site features. So I think that the way the ordinance came in, again, was provides that sort of cap on how, making sure that you keep that space between structures without being too burdensome. And I guess I would also say that the intention of the ordinance wasn't to try to minimize development options. It's really trying to create flexibility. And we've never really had an issue, I think, with trying to dictate the width of structures through zoning.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Okay. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I guess I've got a couple of thoughts. I've heard from a number of constituents in Ward 2, in addition, to the folks we've all heard from in Ward 5 as well, who are really thinking very thoughtfully about this need and this understanding to balance development and infill, with also having it fit both the character of the neighborhood and or feeling like existing structures are being crowded out, or I really see that need to balance. And one thought I have, Councillor Dwight, as you were speaking, I wonder if this amendment is something that we would want to refer to Planning Board for discussion, so that it can be looked at more holistically within this ordinance we're talking about. Like if we may want to refer the ordinance with the amendments to Planning Board, because I I hear you that I think it's important to have a holistic discussion and also to provide that opportunity for input, from folks who are really invested.
You, Councilor Foster. I know I saw some hands. Councilor Jarrett, do you want Councilor Nash to go first, or would you like to speak? Yeah, Councilor Nash. You're muted.
I'll get this one of these days. Yeah, so the way I interpret this is that it would promote structures that we see a lot around town, which is with the front facing pediment. So the narrow part of the house is facing the street, and it would discourage ranches and colonials, and which tend to be broader along the street side of properties. And that I think that would just be one of the natural outcomes of it if we were to if we were to adopt this. And I think I land with Councilor Foster that I think that having a little more discussion by I think the planning board should really have a chance to discuss this before we take this added step. I think it's an interesting idea. I think because the idea is it's going to create greater density on the street and a more fuller streetscape rather than, broad open, front lawns. And not that they're not bad, but if for the urban center, we may want to be going for that narrower look. So, but I think for us to legislate that tonight without a little more research might not be appropriate.
Councilor Dwight.
There are a myriad of styles in this community. I mean, if anyone talks about a cohesiveness in the structural styles of neighborhoods, they're delusional, from my way of thinking. But that I understand the desire to try and maintain some sense of continuity. But the fact is, Councilor Nash pointed out quite right that he just named a couple of styles. But I would also point out that if you insist, and in fact, actually, with this ordinance, at least this minimal width limitation would force, is probably the best way is to have, as Councilor Nash described it, the gable side of the house facing the street. Now, if that house is now facing the street and they're facing south, it means they are not allowed to make a very comprehensive development of solar, for instance. If they were oriented the other way, where the slope of their roof faced the street, which is, for instance, a description that might apply to a ranch home or a cape, the roof of the slope roof could actually accommodate solar panels, which, by the way, conforms rather well with what we've been promoting here as far as making houses more less energy dependent on fossil fuel. So there's all sorts of, always the devil's in the details, and this is somewhat unprecedented, as Carolyn has alluded to, is to limiting the width of a house principally because I think what we're talking about mostly is aesthetics and neighborhood aesthetics. And I would like to be a lot more confident that this actually was fairly and justly applicable and did not limit and restrict the potential for even some unique structures. And I would cite an example by the YMCA, a very modern, not standard house that was designed to, I believe, be net zero. I'm not sure. But the fact is that with some of these standards that we're now applying, it would not be allowed to be built. And mind you, there's resistance in the neighborhood, to be sure. There was resistance when the folks wanted to develop their property that way. I want to always be very careful that I'm not completely inured to the overtures that we've been experiencing, Lord knows. And we've received overtures from many issues in the past year and most recently. And even campaigns to that extent. But I want to understand, I want to proceed very cautiously. And I actually, my thinking conforms more with the intent as Carolyn described it, which is to create more opportunities rather than to limit them. And it's not because I think the city can bank on this and everyone's going to make lots of money. It's because actually the whole reason that we've been discussing, that we've asserted over and over again, is expand inventory, expand opportunity, and as such, also develop and expand affordable housing to promote diversity and to reduce our carbon footprint on this planet. All those motives, and I don't think they're in competition with everyone. I believe that the people who are also advocating a little differently than I have expressed the same intent. But I want to be very careful. I actually take Councillor Foster's recommendation as appropriate and a good sign. I do think this is a significant change to the way we actually zone and manage zoning. And as such, and that's not a knock, because I think Councillor Jarrett has done yeoman's work and continues to, and with all due diligence and conscientiousness. But I think something this chunky, this substantive, and let's be frank, this emotional, needs further deliberation and discussion by people who are actually have more expertise in this field than we do.
Councillor Labarge.
Yes, thank you. I have to agree with what I'm hearing from Councillor Dwight, Councillor Foster. I really do feel that the planning board should highly be involved. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an expert about the zoning parts of this, but I think we have knowledgeable people on the planning board. We have a great planning department, and I'm not into the zoning like they are, but I feel that all the residents should have the opportunity to be able to have this go back to the planning board. And let's go ahead and work it out with the planning board, because it is significant change here. It really is a significant change. So I agree that I feel that this should go to the planning board.
Okay, Councillor Foster.
I was remiss, Councillor Jarrett, in thanking you and complimenting you and say how much I appreciate that you brought this amendment forward. And Councillor Dwight, as I was listening to you talk, I think the other piece that I'm hearing from an awful lot of people is beyond the aesthetics, but also sort of a real desire for our zoning to encourage housing that is less expensive. You know, I am hearing that desire, you know, that yes, there's the desire for our zoning to encourage houses that sort of fit the streetscape or fit the feel of the neighborhood. But in addition, you know, one of the top things people talk about all the time is the cost of housing in Northampton. You know, it's something that people are really concerned about. And I hear this sort of desire. What can we do through zoning, which is Councillor Jarrett, you know, addressing the width of the house, which is going to impact all of these things, less building materials, potentially less expensive. But I guess that's my desire, to see it go for a larger discussion with planning, as well as can we look at this bigger and think about how can we address the sort of bigger issue that people are asking, which is how to, you know, is there a way through zoning that we can encourage the development of housing that is more affordable to more people?
Okay, Councillor Labarge.
Yes, I know Councillor Dwight is probably going to say yes. We have been hearing this for years and years, affordable housing. And we, as counselors, we're working tirelessly to try to make that happen in our city. Many years we've been hearing this. It's happening. It's happening slowly, but we're getting them. In Ward 6, we're getting affordable housing, and I'm so pleased with that. And Councilor Foster, this has been a huge issue for many, many years here in Northampton.
Councilor Foster.
I'll be quick. I just realized I misnomered and should not have used the term or have not have spoken as it as affordable housing and understanding. I know we're all in support of legally affordable housing, but in addition, that seeking for, I think, attainable housing is the term I was looking for as I was speaking.
Okay, Councilor Jarrett. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Thanks everyone. Oh, wait, was there someone else who wanted to speak?
Councilor Maori popped her hand up, but Councilor Maori, do you want to go first, and then we'll let Councilor Jarrett respond to all of this feedback?
Yeah, that's fine. I wanted to thank Councilor Jarrett. And I'm finding this really thought-provoking, and really just want to say, I mean, I hear about the flexibility that Councilor Bright thinks might, would be lost. But I'm also, I think all of our zoning laws do influence our options. So I think, I guess I'm really going to have to give a thought to what flexibility really means, because I think limiting, I think there will certainly be buildings built, and they might be smaller. Is that limiting, or or are we just kind of influencing our city like all the other zoning laws do? So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, Councilor Labarge, and then I want to get back to Councilor Jarrett so he can respond.
Well, I will finish right now. Thank you. Councilor Jarrett, I want to thank you very, very much for working tirelessly on this. It's not an easy job with anything to do with zoning or planning. So thank you.
Councilor Jarrett, I
Yes.
will add my own thanks and real appreciation, because I think it's clear to all of us the immense amount of work and time and effort and collaboration and conversation that you've put into this. So I thank you for this. And please, now the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you, and you're welcome. I'm really happy to be doing this work. And thanks to Carol and Mitch again for spending hours on the phone with me. So yeah, we've added you raise a bunch of points, and I certainly do see the need to think about this issue with the planning board. We've added a bunch of zoning ordinances around the one that specifically promotes affordable housing, the half scale units, the 2-family, and we don't really know how those are going to play out yet, and so those will need time. But one of the things that I've talked with people who were working in Eastern Massachusetts around is this idea of kind of guiding the bulldozer of gentrification, and to realize that there are huge forces that we do not control that are pushing us in particular ways, including higher prices on houses and tear downs, and that how can we guide that to create more affordable housing, whether that's tools like inclusionary zoning, affordable housing trust fund, and how can we guide those, and including what do we allow in terms of when we give a zoning bonus, which is what this reduced lot line is. It's a bonus in exchange for, and in some cases, like you have to plant, you have more trees, and so I'd love to look at that holistically and think about, without just looking at one dimension, which is what this amendment would do. It looks at the width, And so I'd love to look at that more holistically and think about how we can address these huge issues of affordability and the design. So I hope that is helpful in the response. Before I think I will withdraw the motion in a minute, but I want to still be able to discuss it and have others discuss it, and then think about whether there's anything in this round that I may want to introduce for the second reading. The question, we have a 90-day clock, right? So in terms of referring this to the planning board, there are concerns around that. And Carolyn, what is our 90-day clock? What is the date we have to approve this by, or it's we have to start over?
Let me just look at Laura's memo. I think you had it up on the
May 10th was
agenda.
the hearing closed, but I haven't counted out 90 days.
Oh, so I can do that. So, I mean, really May 10th. So there's August 8th is the 90-day clock, but that's only, so it could be referred back. The planning board's going to meet in July. Again, so they could take it up at that meeting, but at the same time, we could just re-advertise as well. So that's there's no reason why, if you wanted even more time than that it could just be, we could just sort of essentially start the public hearing process over if we didn't make the 90-day clock.
And have another public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, I'm not sure if it sounds like we want to have a pretty broad discussion about issues, maybe more than just this one particular issue of widths. So, in a way, what do people think? Do we want to try to refer this to planning board to consider, or do we want to try to start a new process where we consider this and then other issues and discuss that with the planning board?
Councilor Jarrett, to clarify, you mean, do we want to just refer this amendment? So do we want to pass the ordinance or as amended tonight and then take this piece and refer it? Is that what you mean?
Right.
Okay.
All right. So far, this is there's a motion and second, but it's actually not part of the ordinance right now as we're discussing until we vote on that, or if Councilor Jarrett chooses to withdraw it. And then it would be a question of then Councilor Jarrett presenting a standalone proposal. And it may be a modification of what this is, taking some of the aspects of the conversation that would be presented to the planning board. And I don't know, Carolyn, it would seem to me that since a public hearing could open on this one item, that it would be standalone, and then the clock would be ascribed to that timeline. Because essentially all we're doing is amending lots of existing ordinances as it is now. So this would be, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think my understanding is that Councilor Jarrett could present this as a standalone amendment to be reviewed by the planning board, public hearing, probably joint legislative matters, planning board hearing, and then new clock starting all over again. And then this is revisited as a standalone amendment. My thoughts, that's all.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So don't act on this that's actually been officially submitted to the council, but wait until Councilor Jarrett's amendment goes back to the planning board for a public hearing.
What I'm recommending is that we pass the ordinance as amended minus the most, let's presume let's play pretend. Councilor Jarrett withdraws his motion. So we've already approved the amendments, his previous amendments, and my hope is that we pass this ordinance as amended now. And then, as I said, Councilor Jarrett can introduce this B, the item B about the width could be introduced so that it could be massaged in public hearings and hear from the planning board and so forth, and starting a new clock. So that, because it's also worth noting, we only meet once in July and once in August as well. And I really don't want to jam up anybody or any particular ordinances, or, I mean, no offense, but I'm not really keen on another special meeting, but it's, that's entirely possible, but I think it's avoidable.
Councilor Quinlan, did I see your hand?
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say about our August meeting is the 19th. So it seems to me like it would require either a special meeting or a reset of the clock, which I think Councilor Dwight has proposed perfectly.
Councilor Foster.
Yes, I have a question for you, Carolyn. Like, I don't want to talk this to death for sure, but I also feel like with zoning, it's important that any changes we get, or that we've had a chance to really think it through in the intended consequences. And I know we've talked about zero lot line quite a bit and the reduced lot line and the flexibility. And I understand where that's coming from, but I'm also wondering, is there an urgency to this, or is it something that can be discussed all at once with an amendment in planning board? So I'm just curious from your perspective where that sits.
There's definitely no urgency. I mean, this is just an amendment that was brought forward to try to address, concerns about proximity of structures in this context of zero lot line. So, I think if there is so if the council doesn't do anything with this, the existing rules just continue to be in place and until they change. So you could certainly move it to you could even table this and with the intention of bringing something back that's different after this other sort of public hearing to focus on that piece. And it won't affect anything, that I know of. It, there's nothing pressing about it.
Councilor Jarrett.
I mean, obviously, as the sponsor of the original amendment that Carolyn and I worked on, I am in favor of that, and I think it's an excellent addition. So I would love to see that pass, and at our next meeting. And so I think I like the idea of thinking through this issue, introducing it separately, but also thinking about it and talking with other folks more holistically than just widths as well. So I will withdraw my motion, and we'll think about how to bring this forward as a separate item.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll add that while there may not be urgency, the amendments that we've already passed that you worked on were in response to concern. So it's not that while there might not be urgency, there's been a lot of communication and conversation about this topic. Okay, so we are back to the ordinance as amended.
Call the question, please.
Question's been called. Laura, roll call please on ordinance as amended. This is first reading.
And that amendment includes the new language that was introduced and read tonight, just for my own understanding, in addition to the new amendment.
As amended, yes.
As amended, but not with what was just withdrawn by Councilor Jarrett.
Exactly. Okay. Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
and Counselor Labarge.
We didn't hear you, Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading. And we are going to move down to the, oh, sorry, Counselor Jarrett.
Can I have a 5-minute recess?
Sure. We'll be back at 8:36.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are up to the consent agenda. I will read through the consent agenda, then I'll ask if there are any removals because there is no discussion on the consent agenda. First up, we have the minutes of April 15th, 2021 and May 6th, 2021. Then 21.291, appointments to various committees. These are for referral to the City Services Committee. Energy and Sustainability, Ashley Musprat, 15 Franklin Street, July 2021 to June 2024. That's a reappointment. To the Board of Health, Cynthia Swopis, 19 Ford Crossing, term July 2021 to June 2024, also a reappointment. Laurent Levy for School Street, term July 2021, June 2024, also a reappointment. Next, Transportation and Parking Commission, Diana Day, 44 Berkshire Terrace, Apartment 2, term July 2021, June 2024. This is to fill a vacancy. And that is the consent agenda. Any removals?
Move to approve.
Second,
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Floyd.
What?
There is no feelings of TV show. Roll call, please, Laura, on the consent agenda.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan. Counselor Quinlan,
Oh, sorry, yes.
okay. Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
yes,
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Councilor Jarrett?
Yes, sorry.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
and Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Okay. Now we shall recess for the Committee on Finance, please. And so this is also a special meeting on the Committee of Finance. And Laura, will you please call the roll of Finance?
Counselor Labarge,
Yes. Here.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes. Here.
Counselor Shara,
Here.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Here.
Okay. And so the only item that we did not get to at our meeting on last Thursday was the one that was requested that we take up today. And this is 21.286, an order authorizing acquisition of a parcel on the easterly side of the Mill River. And I will read it. It's upon the recommendation of Mayor David J. Narcoitz and the Office of Planning and Sustainability. 21.286, an order authorizing acquisition of a parcel of land on the easterly side of the Mill River and the westerly side of the Mass Central Rail Trail in Leeds. Whereas the parcel subject to this order is located on the westerly side of the Mass Central Rail Trail and the easterly side of the Mill River in Leeds and is shown on a plan of land shown as, quote, locus 05-072-01 and, quote, on a plan entitled, quote, plan of land in Northampton, Massachusetts, Hampshire Registry prepared for the city of Northampton, unquote, dated May 7th, 2021, and recorded in the Hampshire Registry of Deeds and Plan Book 249, page 82. Quote, the parcel, and whereas the open space recreation and multi-use trail plan from 2018 to 2025 calls for increased open space along the Mill River. And whereas there's been strong support from the Leeds community meetings and from the Leeds Civic Association to add the property of the heirs of August R. Tyrrell to the Mill River Greenway, with the Leeds Civic Association agreeing to hold the required conservation restriction on the property and provide long-term assistance cleaning up debris on the property. And whereas the city's ongoing CPA-funded study of informal swimming areas on the Mill and Connecticut rivers show support for this project. Now, therefore, be it ordered, the City Council hereby authorizes the acquisition by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise of the parcel believed to be owned by the heirs of August R. Tyrrell, shown as, quote, locust 05-072-01 on the plan entitled Plan of Land in Northampton, Massachusetts, Hampshire Registry prepared for the city of Northampton, dated May 7, 2021, and recorded in the Hampshire Registry of Deeds and Plan Book 249, page 82, for the purposes of conservation, recreation, and open space, subject to the provisions of Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution, in accordance with the Massachusetts Community Preservation Act, Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B. The parcel shall be in the care, custody, and control of the Northampton Conservation Commission. As damages for the taking, the City Council hereby awards $2,400. Okay, is there a motion?
Move a positive recommendation to City Council, please.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Quinlan, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. And I see Mayor Narcoitz and Carolyn both. Would one of you like to?
I'll defer to Carolyn on this.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so this piece of property actually has not, has sort of shown up as one of those owner unknown, or in fact, there's the owner has been deceased for many years, probably going back to the early 1900s. So we, in fact, in 1976, both the City Council and the Conservation Commission had voted to support acquiring this property, and taken steps to do that. So it was sort of planned way back then. So how long is that? 40, 50 years ago or so, but never quite sealed the deal by recording that instrument at the Register of Deeds. So here we are all these years later, going through the motions again. And I think this time we'll actually take the final step and record it so that it does become city property. So at any rate, that's just all to say that the city has looked at this property for many years and intended to acquire it. And it does fit nicely in with this work that's been going on to look at alternatives for addressing the needs along the Mill River for open space and water access. And we have an arrangement with Lead Civic to take on the maintenance responsibilities, you know, as part of this. So I think it's definitely supported by a number of groups, and so we hope that now this iteration we can actually finally tie the bow on this parcel for the city.
Excellent. Sounds like a good thing to do. Councilor Maori.
Yeah, so I mean, we're all very excited about this in Leeds. The LCA has been working very thoughtfully on this, as well as the River Inclusion Group. The LCA has designed these, you know, beautiful signs, and they're working with the River Inclusion Group on regular, long-term trash pickup. So it's bringing us all together, and I just think this is really vital to solving some of the issues that we all know have arisen as the swimming holes are being used more and more. Really, to me, a lot of those issues are kind of Occam's razor. I mean, there's no posted guidelines at all. No one knows when, you know, if you know, they're on legal property or they're not. And I think this would just help to give some guidelines, some structure, and really help regulate, protect the land, but also make it actually easier for visitors to feel comfortable there.
Now, it just sort of another piece that I didn't mention was, you know, there's still this other piece of private property on the other side that the dam is owned privately by, you know, TARPAC. So that's still out there as potentially an issue. This is not where the dam is. This is north of that.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Councilor Jarrett.
Carolyn, do you have a map of this area so we could see it in context?
Yes, sorry. I thought that was in the package. So
I don't see it.
Okay, so yeah, let me just pull it up and I can screen share. I'm just going to go to I think I have the map here.
Well, Carolyn's looking for it. Any other questions or comments?
Okay, so I'm going to screen share here.
You should be able to, yeah.
So can everybody see the map here? So this is the bike path, this area here. So the parcel is that one that I just clicked on. It's this long rectangular one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see this parcel is, I'll zoom in a little bit. This area is so there, see where it says dam path. This is all part of the Chartback property over here. It crosses over, and then this piece is just north of that up here. And it runs up here. It's this sort of long, skinny finger that runs along the bike path in this yellow outline right here.
Great, thank you for that. Councilor Maori?
Yeah, so it abuts the conservation land, the city's conservation land. But it's true that this will not solve the problem of me cringing while watching teenagers jump off the Chartback Dam. So that is its own issue. But it's a really lovely stretch of land, and it is used as well as a swimming hole.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, roll call please on a positive recommendation, Laura.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
and Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, the other three items we already addressed at the meeting on Thursday, so we can adjourn finance.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Laura, roll call please on adjourning.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
and Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, we are back in the full city council and we will take up that financial order that we just discussed. So this is 21.286, an order authorizing acquisition of a parcel on the easterly side of the Mill River. This is in first reading.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Jarrett. Any discussion by the full council? Seeing none, roll call please, Laura.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
and Councilor Nash.
Yes.
Okay, that passes on first reading. The t-shirts we did on June 3rd. We've already done the second reading on the Academy of Music restroom expansion and renovation. 21.292, we also moved on June 3rd. And as did we, so financial orders and second reading 21.271, we moved on June 3rd. So we are down to orders 21.278 in order to
Madam
yes,
President,
sorry.
I did ask at our last meeting whether we'd be able to take up the Roundhouse project on second reading. And Director Pomerantz is with us tonight to answer questions that folks may have. So if that's possible.
Absolutely, pardon, sorry about that. So let's go through the
I
same
would,
process.
I'm sorry, I was gonna move to suspend rules to allow for a second reading.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Foster. Any discussion on suspension of rules? Seeing none, roll call on suspending rules, please.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
and Councilor Quinlan.
Yes. How does Scout vote?
Move second reading, please.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Quinlan. Second reading. Director Pomerantz, apologies. I'm sorry, I almost skipped you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Oh, and then I won't let you unmute. There you go. Hold on. There you go. That should work. Yes.
Thank
Oh.
you, Council President. Good evening.
Good evening. I feel like we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Okay, hold on a second.
Okay.
How's that?
Oh, much better. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here. So I wanted to briefly give you an overview of the Roundhouse project, which we have already bid and are ready to get to work on. This project started with a capital appropriation, I think, 3+ years ago, to just redo the lot. And it evolved into a project where we have done some land taking. We're increasing the number of parking spaces by 22 when everything is said and done. We're rerouting the bike path over towards the Northampton Housing Authority just a bit. We are addressing a number of safety concerns with upgraded lighting. We're putting in some stormwater diversion at the request of the DPW. And we're also making some accommodations to better serve Northampton Fire Rescue in case they have to bring apparatus into the lot to access the back of the apartment building on the west side. So the project has sort of grown. There was going to be a solar piece at some point, but because of all the infrastructure in the parking lot or under the parking lot, that has been dropped. So we went through site plan review and were approved back in April. Like I said, we have bid the project. I have an initial letter of award that I'm going to be sending out to a contractor. And we want to get as much of the construction done by the end of the summer. Obviously, with the Masonic Street lot closed now, we want to move this project as fast as we can and hopefully have it back in operation before fall comes and Smith College returns, et cetera. So that's sort of a quick synopsis of the project.
Thank you for that. Counselors, any questions for Director Pomerantz? Counselor Jarrett.
I'd just like to thank Director Pomerantz for working with me, and also to Chris Mason for thinking about the lighting issues and being willing to think about how we can improve those within the existing contract that's happening. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Counselor.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura. This is on second reading.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
and Counselor Shara.
Yes. Okay, that passes in second reading. Thank you so much, Director Pomerantz, for joining us tonight. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No, my pleasure and good to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are down to 21.278, in order transferring care, custody, and control of a certain area of land from Smith Voc to DPW. This is on first reading. And
Move approval.
Seconder.
there's been made by Councilor Dwight and seconded by Councilor Labarge. I'm going to read it. This is in City Council June 3rd, 2021, but we've continued today upon the recommendation of Mayor David J. Narkowitz and Department of Public Works. 21.278, order transferring care, custody, and control of a certain area of land from Smith Vocational Agricultural High School to Department of Public Works. Whereas on May 18th, 2021, the Board of Trustees of Smith Vocational Agricultural High School voted to declare surplus certain land in its charge on Haydenville Road for the purpose of allowing the construction of a pressure-reduced valve, PRV, structure and appurtenances. I've never seen this word before. Appurtenances associated therewith. And whereas the locus of the proposed PRV structure is shown on a sketch plan prepared by Tata and Howard entitled Proposed Approximate PRV Project Easements, Northampton, Massachusetts. And whereas pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15A, a city council vote by 2/3 majority is required to redesignate the care, custody, and control of city-owned land from one department to another. Now, therefore, the Northampton City Council orders as follows. Ordered that in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15A, the care, custody, and control of the land shown on the sketch plan prepared by Tata and Howard entitled Proposed Approximate PRV Project Easements, Northampton, MA, shall be transferred to the Department of Public Works for the purpose of constructing thereon a pressure-reduced valve structure and appurtenances, all as shown on such plan, transfer of care, custody, and control of the temporary easement, so-called, as shown on the plan, shall lapse upon the closeout of the building permit, therefore, or 1 year from the date of this order, whichever occurs sooner without further order. Okay, it's already on the floor. I feel like sometimes these get written with extra alliteration just to get me tongue-tied. So thanks so much for that, everybody. Mayor Narcoitz?
Yes, thank you, Council President. For those of you who may wonder where this is, I know there's a map, but if you're heading up on Route 9 toward Leeds and you know where Scotty's is located, there is directly across the street, there is a dirt road with a gate that actually is part of the Smith Vocational property, and it leads up to their horticulture department area where they work with their students on part of their horticulture program. And so just to the left of that dirt road, there is a small location that the DPW approached Smith Vocational about to basically site this small facility, which is there to basically house this pressure reducing valve, which is like it sounds, like a pressure reducing valve someone may have in their home, but obviously this was on one of the main water lines. So they got permission from the Smith Vocational Board of Trustees. They actually did a site visit with the trustees to show them where it would be located. It's fairly small. It won't interfere in any way with their operations. And so now, because all Smith property is owned by the city, it now comes to you to essentially assign this property to the DPW for the construction of this pressure reducing valve and appurtenances.
Now you tell me how it's pronounced. Thank you for that. Councilor Labarge.
That's, Mayor, how much property is involved here?
It's a very small, there is a diagram. I don't know if Laura wants to show it. It's a very small area. And actually, if you went up there today, you'd see some stakes in the ground. I don't have the dimensions, but was there a diagram in your?
Yes, there is. I'm pulling it up.
Okay. So you can see the dirt road. And so basically it's just a small little building, 20 by 15 feet, it says on the map. So, a shed basically, but it's obviously a shed that will house this valve. And there'll be a small little parking area or driveway in case the DPW needs to access it to be able to maintain it. But as I said, it's sort of off their logging road, is what I call it. And it's in a wooded area. It just happens to be in a location that is in proximity to that 36-inch water main line. And so it's an ideal location for them to put that. And again, the trustees went out and took a look at it with Director LaScalia, and they had no problem allowing the city to construct that there.
Mayor, could I just ask you, how much land does Smith Voc own throughout that whole area?
So, if you it's funny, I have a map of that, but I don't have it on this computer. They own, you go up to the top of that. If you follow that road up to the top, there's an area where there's a cell tower, then you get up to the very top, and there's a huge amount of area where they've constructed a Butler building, and it's basically where their students learn to use skid steers and backhoes and all the other heavy equipment for earth moving and things like that. I think they did but they also acquired some land from the former Girl Scout camp. And then I even think some former VA property was given to them as well. So it's It's many, many acres, more in the dozens of acres, not hundreds of acres, but it's a fairly significant plot. There's a lot of wetlands there. And they do mow a significant portion of the land actually for hay to the right of that, sorry, Scout, to the right of that driveway. If you were standing at Scotty's looking at the driveway, there's kind of a wooded area. There's sort of a grassy area. And then there's sort of a smaller tree line, and then you get to the large grassy area at the base of where the VA hospital is. So they do maintain that, and they do hay that land, but there's a lot of wetland back there.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, roll call please, Laura, on first reading.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Counselor Foster.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, we
yes.
missed. Reverse those. Okay, Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, that passes on first reading, and we're at 21.288 in order further amending order 20.062 entered on June 4th, 2020 as amended by order 20.149 and order 21.211. This is on first reading, and I will read it. It's upon the recommendation of Mayor David J. Narkowitz, whereas on June 4th, 2020, the Northampton City Council entered Order 20.062, which suspended the effect of certain ordinances in order to facilitate the use of public property for outdoor dining in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas Order 20.062 expired by its terms on November 15, 2020, whereas on November 12, 2020, the City Council extended Order 20.062 to March 31st, 2021 by Order 20.149, and whereas on March 18, 2021, the City Council further extended Order 20.062 to November 1st, 2021, or 60 days after the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts rescinds the declared state of emergency, whichever is sooner, by Order 21.211. And whereas the Governor declared state of emergency will be rescinded effective June 15th, 2021, and therefore Order 20.062 as amended will expire on August 15th, 2021. And whereas the mayor desires to allow Order 20.062 to continue to November 1st, 2021, notwithstanding the rescission of the governor's declared state of emergency. Now, therefore, the Northampton City Council orders as follows: ordered that paragraph 6 of Order 20.062, as amended by Order 21.211, shall be further amended by striking the phrase, quote, or 60 days after the Governor of Commonwealth of Massachusetts rescinds the declared state of emergency, whichever is sooner, end quote. All other provisions of Order 20.062 as amended shall remain in full force and effect.
Move approval for purposes of discussion.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Foster. Mayor Narkowitz, I think it's kind of
Yes.
self-explanatory, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
So this is the order that we've kept amending, largely because the pandemic, we didn't fully understand how long the pandemic would last. And so what this actually does, and actually a similar thing is happening at the state level. So the governor issued basically on June 15th, lifted his state of emergency. Many other state regulations and then these local sort of emergency regulations were kind of tied to the lifting of that order. A good example is the extension of premises that was allowed basically by an emergency order of the governor and the ABCC, which allowed restaurants to move outside with some more flexibility to be able to do outdoor dining. And the governor's actually, that bill also said that 60 days following the expiration of the state of emergency, that would go away. Well, of course, that means that August 15th, all outdoor dining in the Commonwealth would have to go away at that point. And obviously, I don't think that that was the intent at the time, just purely the timing of when the state of emergency ended. So what we're hoping to do is to remove that 60 days after the state of emergency ended here locally. And there's a bill that's racing through the House and Senate right now that the governor himself filed that would basically remove that same provision in the prior emergency legislation. Again, so that the outdoor dining can continue until the end of this year. And they're actually looking at assessing long-term whether some of these changes to outdoor dining and premises could be made permanent, just because there's been a pretty positive response to it. So essentially, like here in Northampton, the whole Summer on Strong project, all the other outdoor dining that we've set up in areas of the public way without having to permanently change ordinances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That would all essentially become illegal on August 15th if you didn't amend your previous order allowing it to happen. So this would merely get it to November 1st, which we think gets us through the full outdoor dining season. And then hopefully there'll be more permanent guidance of some kind from the state as we look at what happens in the spring of 2022. I use the term we lightly and figuratively, but yes. Mm-hmm.
Counselor Dwight.
Okay, so I'm gonna be a bit of a nudge on this, and I expressed earlier, and I continue to express that two things, and this is me being cranky and being a lame duck, so you bear with me, please. It is the public right of way. It's public land. It's property held in common by us, and we've dealt with that, for instance, taking the land to allow people access to the Mill River and stuff. But problematically, in the past, when we've given over to private businesses, local business that we want to support and help in every way, and particularly in these exceptional times, sometimes there's a sense of ownership that starts to be assumed, and a primacy that's not there, that the businesses are not entitled to. These are still public ways, and that concerns me, and it continues to concern me, and particularly if this becomes permanent. That is to say, I think what has been done and what is continually, and which is continued to be realized by the citizens of Northampton, people visiting, is a good thing insofar as it is being enjoyed by many people all over. And in fact, actually, it demonstrates quite well the discussion that got a lot of negative pushback from business owners about when we try to promote and expand this type of arrangement on Main Street in particular. So the cranky part of me is going, I would imagine that the businesses that have benefited from this are very grateful and have expressed that over and over again. I won't presume otherwise. They haven't deigned to complain. Other business owners have complained about other issues downtown that unfortunately it assumes this sense of ownership or primacy or authority over spaces that is not theirs. It's ours. It's all of ours. And unfortunately, because this is done with the best intentions, and so far as I've seen, the best outcome. And I think it has the ability to do so. But in the absence of state law that literally determines where the public's right ends and the private ownership begins, this is an experiment, and laudable. And by the way, let me preface this by saying I'm going to vote to support this, and because this is not a hill I choose to die on, but it is a social equity issue, and I can't let this pass without us not acknowledging that, and then trying to proceed with all due diligence and caution to avoid people marking trees that aren't theirs, if you will. So there, I've gassed on enough about that, and we'll just leave it lay.
Thank you, Councillor Dwight. What will we do when you no longer
I know.
are the person who makes
Your meetings will be shorter. That's for sure.
I always appreciate you bringing up these issues. Counselor Nash.
Thank you, Council President. I appreciate Councilor Dwight's, I'm not going to call it crankiness here, but his carefulness around all of this. I absolutely agree. We need to be really careful about this, as you know. But I do want to say that what's happened on Lower Main Street has really highlighted, you know, in many ways what, you know, Main Street, the vitality that people have been talking about. That yes, much of the space right now, that vitality is linked to restaurants and businesses rather than public space. But it does demonstrate that, you know, Main Street can be narrower and traffic can still flow. That there can be lots of festive, lively happening going on, and it'll attract people downtown. And I do want to note that most of this is in Ward 3. And I'm very pleased with, you know, I've done a lot of outreach with many of these businesses to get them on board with the idea of, you know, and working with the city. And the mayor's office has been really great around this. The Summer on Strong project is really, it's really revitalized things down there. So anyway, yes, I'm going to vote yes, and that as we move forward with our downtown redesign, that there is going to be attention that we really need to tend to. That, you know, that businesses, people, you know, aren't allowed to just mark out space that's everybody's. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Mary.
Yeah, just really want to express how glad I am that Councilor Dwight brought that up, because I think it's something we can kind of have in our consciousness and be aware of and be, you know, watching. It is an experiment. That's a really good way of putting it. Thank you for bringing it up.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Dwight and the others. You know, I've been very pleased with the additional outdoor seating and the public pedestrian space this has created. And we've taken a lot of that space, you know, from space that's been dominated by motor vehicles and making it into a public pedestrian space, with some of it temporarily given to businesses. And I would ask kind of with what the agreements are with those businesses, as far as, you know, if a person who's not a customer sits at one of those tables that's in the public space, do they have a right to sit there, or only if they're a paying customer? Is that defined?
Well, in terms of the, you know, in terms of the places that have liquor licenses, you know, that had to go before the Board of License Commission and had to fill out a plan and had to get, you know, a vote of the License Commission. They have to kind of control those spaces and make sure that they're under their control, because they're, you know, their liquor license is associated with it. So actually they can't allow people to just kind of flow in and out of it. But then there are some places that don't have liquor licenses. And so there's actually, that's a little bit more, you know, free flowing in terms of who can sit there and who can't sit there. So it's sort of a mixture depending on what it is. And that was the same before COVID. I mean, before COVID, if you had outdoor seating, you had to, you know, you actually have to have a barrier, a physical barrier around it and control it, because there's alcohol either being served or could be served. All this extension did was allow that to be a break between the sidewalk and the business, to have it be in the street. That's sort of what they did for the pandemic. So it's a mixture depending on whether there's a liquor license involved. So yeah, that's the distinction.
Great, thank you for that explanation. I'd be very curious to see, if we move toward a permanent solution, how we look at these equity issues and determine, you know, who gets what space and how do we make sure that space is shared well. And so I'll look forward to that discussion.
No doubt, no doubt.
Okay, any further discussion on this order? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Counselor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay, that passes on first reading, and we're up to ordinances not yet referred. And
Madam President, could I just ask, will this be on the 14th or will it go to the 17th? I'm just curious. Yeah. I realize it's going to pass. I know
so our next meeting is the 17th.
17th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. It's a couple days after, but it's still within the 60 days, so it should be fine. I mean, the governor's order lifts on the 15th. We mainly want, I know there were a lot of very anxious business owners who've invested a lot of money in setting all this stuff up, and they were obviously a little concerned and scrambling when the governor put his order out. So, but it sounds like this will be fine because there's that 60-day grace period. So this should be fine.
Okay. So we're at 21.277, an ordinance relative to off-street handicapped parking spaces. Counselor Foster first.
Thank you. I need to abstain from this. I have a conflict of interest as the executive director of All Out Adventures. We run programs at the location under consideration.
Thank you. So this is to refer.
Yeah, move to refer, excuse me, move to refer to legislative matters, please.
Second.
First made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Nash. Any discussion on the referral? Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura. Referring.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Counselor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay, that has been referred to legislative matters. And I believe, Laura, we got everything, yes?
I believe so.
Okay, great job by Laura, who, it's not splitting this agenda into two meetings. It's actually pretty tricky, so well done. Okay, then we can adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
First made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Jarrett, and roll call, please, on adjourning.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Okay, we are
Dr.
adjourned.
Shara's house is